call the meeting of New York City Transit and Bus Committee to order and ask if there are any public speakers who have signed up.
There are public speakers, Mr. Chairman. There are 3 public speakers. The first speaker is Murray Bowden, and Mr. Bowden will be followed by Sophia Palumbo.
Thank you. I'd like to move this up because my grandchildren watched the video. Now, we're missing an airliner over the somewhere, and in 1955, I worked for Curtiss Wright in a cockpit designing flight simulators. This is the picture of the cockpit of the airliner that disappeared. Brought to mind the picture of the cockpit of my Prius, which you have a copy and you have. This shows the speed as a number about this big, and it shows that the door is open, and that's about it. How many miles before I run out of gas? The buses that you're designing only need 3 or 4 pieces of information on the dashboard in front of them. 1, how fast am I going? 2, is any door opening? And there's a couple of other things. How much information have you got on the dashboard of your buses? Irrelevant stuff that distracts the driver. The other thing is the size of the steering wheel. It's all controlled by electronics, as your buses are controlled by electronics. The kids today are using joysticks in their games. Your buses are all controlled by computers. Why don't you have joysticks controlling your buses? Why don't you convert all your buses from those enormous wheels to little bitty ones, and so people don't spend their time turning the wheels and they can control and watch where they're going. Red fire engines. We've always used red fire engines. New York City's full of red fire engines, but white and yellow are safer. Grand Central, I walked through this morning, they're painting the columns bright yellow.
Mr. Bowden, would you please sum up?
Certainly. It's always a pleasure to come here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sophia Palumbo, and she will be followed by George Kaufer.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Sophia Palumbo. I'm a civil engineering student at the City College of New York and a Staten Island resident who would like the subject of bus service in the Bull's Head and Graniteville neighborhoods. Right now, many people in this area have long walks to get to the nearest bus route, and people especially living by the Staten Island Expressway have this problem because there are bus routes on Forest Avenue and Victory Boulevard, but there's a huge gap in between with no service. Myself and other neighborhood residents have developed a plan that would address this issue, as well as several other transportation issues on the North Shore of Staten Island. Unfortunately, we've heard nothing but excuses from the MTA regarding why this plan can't be implemented. One excuse is that since the expressway bisects the neighborhood, each side can only receive service in one direction. However, you refuse to acknowledge the possibility of having the route operate as a loop route with one terminal. This is done on the 4 bus routes for LaGuardia Airport, as well as express bus routes in Manhattan. Those areas have far worse traffic issues, and yet you manage to do it. It's not an ideal situation, but the whole point in having a planning department is to deal with these types of situations. Another excuse is that people on those streets might buses going down these streets, but we have a petition with 1,521 signatures, as well as the backing of several community groups. The vast majority of the community has shown support for the proposal, including many people who live directly on Fahey Avenue and Lambert's Lane. Any excuses involving the cost of our proposal would be frustrating for Staten Islanders, since the proposal would cost a small fraction of the millions of dollars you've gained over the past few years, specifically set aside for improvements. It is always easier to do nothing and make excuses, but this is exactly why Staten Island overall continues to receive bad service. The MTA has been very slow in adapting to shifts and changes in demand, and so ridership and service levels don't reach their full potential. This is a chance to start changing that, and we're willing to work with you to do that. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Palumbo. The next and last speaker is George Kaufer.
Hello everybody, my name is George Kaufer and I'm from the Mariners Harbor Civic Association, and I'd like to speak once again on the issue in the gap in service in Graniteville, Staten Island. Roughly 2 months ago we were informed that the MTA was preparing another response to our proposal. We have yet to receive one. I would like to say that I hope this response takes into consideration the comments that I made in July of last year in response to their supposed analysis of the proposal. I say supposed because essentially it was a list of excuses as to why the MTA didn't want to add the new service, some of which quite frankly made no sense or were self-contradictory. There was no acknowledgement of the benefits the proposal would bring. It didn't give any estimates of the amount of new ridership that would be generated as a result of the expansion of service, nor did it acknowledge the fact that certain areas were beyond the coverage guidelines, regardless of how you want to deny it. You recently did a study of the bus service in Co-op City, which presented both the pros and cons of making certain changes to the service over there. I would appreciate it if your analysis of Graniteville took the same approach. You can do an analysis of the whole North Shore or just the Graniteville neighborhood, whichever you see fit. And as always, we are requesting that you keep the lines of communication open and allow us to comment on your analysis, instead of just saying, we did the analysis, we're not making any changes, end of story. Other areas have sued the MTA to provide the service, or held massive rallies, or resorted to other drastic measures. I mean, we all saw how it went down with the B-37. We're willing to do that. We're willing to sue and create, massive rallies and generate large press coverage, but I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. We're looking forward to working with you. As you can see, this is the third person who's physically spoken here in favor of the proposal, and there's been about 10 people who sent in emails who have never received a response. So there is support for the proposal.
Please summarize your remarks, sir.
Okay. We're looking forward to working with you, and as stated, we're hoping for a fluid exchange of ideas where all our comments are taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your comments. Before we proceed with the agenda, I'd like to ask New York City Transit President Carmen Bianco to take the microphone for a special presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Before we officially begin today's discussion, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the valiant efforts of Officers James Lee and Randy Chow, both of whom were recently involved in a serious incident as they were doing what they were trained to do, protect and serve. On February 26, Officer Lee and Chow of the 71st Precinct attempted to stop and question an individual they witnessed trying to enter the rear door of a B-46 bus. The perpetrator began to flee and then turned and shot at both officers. Officer Chow was not hit, but Officer Lee was shot 4 times. Thankfully, his injuries, while serious, were not life-threatening. The tragic shooting on one of our B-15 buses just last Thursday that resulted in the death of Angel Rojas highlights the dangers our officers face in protecting us. We've asked Officer Lee and Officer Chow to join us this morning because we believe it's important for us to recognize and celebrate the efforts of the brave men and women in law enforcement, many of whom have suffered from injuries and even death in the line of duty, all with a little more than just thank you to show for it. This morning we're delighted to see the families of Officer Lee and Chow who are here today to acknowledge the NYPD officials also here this morning. With us this morning we have Chief Owen Monahan, who is the Borough Commander of Brooklyn South, Deputy Inspector George Fitzgibbon, the Commanding Officer of the 71st Precinct, Sergeant Albert Kelly, the Condition Sergeant, 71st Precinct, and Detective Minnie Martinez, Community Affairs Officer. Officer Lee and Chow, I'd ask you if you would please join me now in the center of the room. We want to show you our appreciation with a little token of a little plaque. Thank you. Can I ask you to join us, Freddie?
Fantastic.
Thank you. Officer Lee and Chow, we're just so happy you were able to join us today, and all the executives from NYPD. What we'd like to do is to give to both of you a plaque from New York City Transit, the MTA New York City Transit. It's a Heroism Award presented to each one of you in recognition of your extraordinary bravery and unselfish actions in the face of extreme danger while confronting an armed fare beater on the B46 bus at Utica Avenue and Empire Boulevard on February 26, 2014. Thank you so much for all that you've done. We just hope that you have a speedy recovery and that you have very, very long careers at NYPD. Thank you for being here today.
Just stay there 1 second. Gentlemen, thank you. Officer, stay there.
No. I'm going there to do some pro bono consulting. That means I take vacation and I meet with the people that build the metro in Tel Aviv. With someone that invited pays for the flight to the hotel. So that's kosher. That's good. And I can get paid in tickets. So that's okay. That's good. It's a nice thing. It's nice. We have to start at the top now with the minutes and. Thank you. That was a nice thing.
Stay there 1 second. Great, thank you.
That was very nice.
Once again, thank you, officers, very, very much for your bravery and heroism. Ready to proceed with our agenda. If you have read the minutes, I presume by now you have, is there a motion to approve?
I move the minutes be adopted.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any changes, Mr. Bergen, to the work plan?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are not.
Then I'd be very happy to turn this part of the meeting over to President Carmen Bianco.
You want to read? Do you have a statement or you want to read it? Your opening statement.
All right. I did have an opening statement. Here we go. It's almost as if I had. And it's important, I think we try to keep our meetings brief, so you'll recall that at the January meeting of the committee, staff streamlined the statistical portions of the operations report in order to leave enough time to deliver and discuss a thorough and relevant report on safety at New York City Transit. That approach, I think, was, and I hope you'll agree, was very helpful, especially since all the monthly statistics are available in our agenda books. Therefore, I've now asked Carmen and Darrell and their staffs going forward to streamline the statistics portion of the operations report during our committee meetings. This will enable us to keep our meetings within the scheduled time and also allow for a fuller discussion of broader policy and strategic issues facing New York City Transit and bus, and how management handles the many challenges of operating our large and complex transit network. If you do agree with that, I hope you'll assist by limiting the questions to the places where a board can and should play a stronger role. That is in discussion of strategy and operations. So with that, I'd like to turn the meeting over once again to President Carmen Bianco.
Thank you, Freddie. You'll notice a common thread in our operations report this month. We focus on the impact the inclement weather conditions had on operations throughout the month of January. In fact, in January we saw 19.7 inches of snow, more than double the average for January. We'll discuss how low temperatures, snow, and ice affect operations and our response to these conditions from both the bus and subway perspectives. So let's start with Joe Leader for subways.
Good morning. It is difficult to discuss January's operations without focusing on the weather. In January, we experienced approximately 20 inches of snow and 6 different winter operations plans. Implementing these plans places extra strain on our employees as well as our operations. For example, we required underground storage of all or part of our fleet on 9 days during the month of January. In addition to snow, very cold weather significantly impacts our operations. The average low temperature in January was 5 degrees below normal, and we experienced temperatures below 10 degrees on 6 days during the month. The weather impacts not only our ability to deliver service, but disrupts construction and maintenance activities throughout the system. During the month of January, we had to cancel a large number of our general orders, and Fast Track was only able to work 11 of the 16 nights that it was scheduled and planned for the month of January. While I'm very proud of the Subway's organization for safely providing service throughout these storms, these incredibly challenging weather conditions significantly affected our operating environment. We see this reflected in our operating statistics in January. Despite these challenges, we continue to hold our system long-term weight assessment figures relatively constant. We continue to identify planning, operational, and contingency strategies that provide regular intervals of service for our customers, and we do this as we continue to prioritize critical maintenance in our system. These strategies are employed around the clock during both inclement weather as well as normal operating conditions.
Thank you. Joe, are we ready for the bus performance indicators?
Good morning. Last month, both Carmen and I took a moment to comment on the performance of our people through the extreme weather that occurred throughout this winter. We encountered numerous snow events in January, many of which were significant and required the installation of chains on our fleet. The chaining of our fleet starts as many as 36 to 48 hours prior to an event and lasts a comparable length of time after the event has passed for chain removal. Considering that in January we undertook this chaining activity on 3 separate occasions, one can understand the impact on our normal workload and on our workforce. We continue to experience significant snow events in February as a result in the fact that this was the 7th snowiest winter of all time. This snow, combined with significantly below average temperatures, has presented us with significant challenges. In what we hope is the aftermath of this season, we will still be working diligently to bring our equipment back to its pre-winter state as we continue to provide a high level of customer-friendly bus service. As we work hard to do that, you will notice the month-to-month operating statistics, which are provided in the committee book, reflect those changes and challenges. However, the 12-month trend continues to reflect the achievements we have shown this last year, as all 12-month averages remain higher than the 12-month ending period the year before. We are approaching spring with great anticipation of restoring our bus performance indicators to the levels that we've worked so hard to achieve in 2013, and that completes the bus report.
Thank you very much. And now for our safety report, Cheryl Kennedy.
Okay, safety results for subways were as follows. The subway customer accident rate through December increased by 4.6% over the previous 12-month period. Fires through January increased by 12% over the last 12 months. The employee lost time accident rate through January for the Department of Subways increased by 14.9% for the rolling 12-month period. Slip, trip, fall accidents were the predominant type over the last 12 months. Safety results for NYCT bus and MTA bus through January 2014 were as follows. Bus collisions per million miles traveled increased by 5.7% for the 12-month period through January 2014. Bus collision injuries per million miles increased by 8.9% for the same 12-month period. Weather was a factor in January, causing 85 weather-related incidents versus only 15 the prior January. This contributed to an increase in the 12-month rate. The combined 12-month rate for bus customer accidents per million customers decreased by 5.7% through January 2014. Bus customer accident injuries per million customers decreased by 2.4% for the same 12-month period. The employee lost time accident rate for the rolling 12-month period was down 5.9% for NYCT bus and 17.1% for MTA bus.
Thank you. And now for a discussion of subway crime statistics, Chief Joe Fox.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good morning. I'm pleased to report that the first 2 months of 2014 total major felony crime was down 7% within the transit system compared to the same period in 2013. On top of significant reductions last year, this trend is encouraging. These 29 fewer incidents include a 9% year-to-date decline in robberies and 20 fewer grand larceny incidents, a 7% decrease. Felony assaults for the period were also down 13% with 4 fewer incidents. For the month of February, total major felonies were down 0.6%, with 1 less incident than the same period in 2013. This decrease for the month was led by 26.7% decrease in felony arrests with 4 fewer incidents, 11 versus 15. Of the 165 major felonies year to date, 32% were committed in Manhattan, 19% in Queens, 36% in Brooklyn, and 12% in the Bronx, which is a relatively constant trend. Our enforcement of quality of life offenses remains strong. Year to date, panhandler arrests are up 232% over last year, a difference of 179 arrests, 256 versus 77. Enforcement related to illegal peddlers is up also, with 40 more arrests for the period versus last year, with a 102% increase, 89 versus 49. I want to take a moment to speak about our quality of life and fare evasion enforcement. It's been shown time and time again that there's a direct relationship between fare beaters and other types of crime within the system. At the heart of our crime reduction strategy is restricting those who enter the transit system with the sole intention of committing a crime. In combating unlawful access, we continually encounter persons with extensive criminal histories and open warrants. When confronting people who are avoiding lawful payment of the fare, we also find that they are sometimes actively engaging in other crimes. In one such incident, on March 8, Officer Edward Tickman and Sergeant Franny Nunez of Transit District 11 observed a male jump over the turnstile at the 176th Street and Jerome Avenue station in the Bronx. Upon stopping him, they discovered he was in possession of a loaded .38 caliber revolver. He was later identified as 26-year-old Cameron Thornton, who had previously been arrested for theft of service. He was charged with criminal possession of a weapon and is currently on bail awaiting his next court appearance. Our enforcement of quality of life offenses and fare evasion has always been and will continue to remain a very high priority for the Transit Bureau. I want to assure this board and our commuters that our focus on the relationship between lower level offenses and major felonies within the transit system will continue. Through this effort, we'll further reduce fare evasion and crime and the crime that so often accompanies it. Part of our effort to reduce crime also includes a focus on reducing larcenies. Grand larceny makes up 68% of the major felonies within transit, a substantial portion of crime. Thefts that include a credit card or debit card among the property stolen currently account for 36% of all of our larcenies within the transit system. As you may imagine, there is often a lag between the time the theft occurs and when a victim realizes it. Perpetrators attempt to capitalize on this, especially when credit cards are stolen, using these cards immediately after the theft and before a victim has an opportunity to cancel the card. Features are now available through most major banking institutions that alert users to each purchase made with their credit card or debit card. This can be incredibly useful to victims as well as our officers and investigators. With such alerts in place, one can receive a notification of a purchase moments after a transaction. For example, if a thief would remove a wallet from a subway rider and use the victim's debit card to purchase a Metro card, the victim could receive an alert email via their smartphone moments later. In some instances, the perpetrator's location could be determined, such as while they're in a store, thereby helping our officers and investigators. As always, support from the public and our commuters combating crime is critical to our efforts. In addition to passengers being diligent in protecting their property from theft, we strongly encourage members of the public to make use of the available credit card features that could prove useful in the event that a theft occurs or is suspected. As I've said, most major banking institutions now offer some type of account alerts to enhance awareness. There's also third-party applications available, and the major credit reporting bureaus each offer fraud alerts that may be helpful. Customers should carefully consider using such alerts if available and appropriate. By together using technologies that are increasingly available to us, both the public and the police will be in the best possible position to further reduce crime and enhance the quality of life throughout our transit system and our communities. Thank you, Mr. Tom Prendergast, Carmen, Joe Lita, and the members of the board, and look forward to your continued support. You have ours, and any questions or suggestions, please ask.
Thank you very much, Chief. We're ready for oh, of course.
Ms. Andrew.
Chief, I'm very in agreement with your assessment and past police commissioners that stopping crime at the turnstiles is frequently, a great thing because some of these people are guilty of much more serious crimes than fare evasion. What should we do when we see somebody evading the fare? What is the best thing for anybody to do? Should we phone in a description? Should we follow the person until we see a police officer? What would you suggest?
I would not advise to follow the person, because you really don't want to do anything that may prompt an altercation between you and the person. I mean, in this case, this person was armed with a weapon, a loaded weapon. So 311, tell a police officer without following him if you happen to see an officer in the same station, in a way where it's the person won't see that you're passing that information on. Thank you.
Are we ready for the finance report, New York City Transit? Carmen Bianco.
Thank you. Preliminary financial results for January 2014. New York City Transit fare box revenue was $319.9 million, 12.8 million, or 3.8% below budget due to severe winter weather. Preliminary January 2014 operating expenses before depreciation and OPEB exceeded budget by $33.3 million, or 6.3%. Labor expenses were higher by $20.9 million, 5.3%, due mostly to the impacts of multiple snowstorms, which caused higher overtime requirements and a reduction in reimbursable work, resulting in lower reimbursable overhead credits. Non-labor expenses were above budget by $12.4 million, or 9.2%, due largely to the unfavorable timing of professional service contract expenses, partly offset by underruns in paratransit service contract expenses. Preliminary ridership, January 2014, New York City Transit ridership totaled 188.8 million, 4.9%, 4.9% below budget. That was a total of 9.8 million riders. I'm not sure that's, seems like that's out of context, Bob. The severe weather in January reduced ridership by an estimated 6.9 million riders. January 2014 average weekday ridership results compared to January 2013 were as follows. Subway ridership was 5.2 million, a decrease of 0.1%. New York City Transit local bus ridership was 1.9 million, a decrease of 9.4%. New York City Transit Express bus ridership was 39,000, a decrease of 5.9%, and paratransit ridership was 25,000, a decrease of 13.9%. An early look at the preliminary February 2014 financial results. Fare box revenue was 7.2 million, that's 2.3% below budget, due mainly to severe weather in February, including 29 inches of snow. Preliminary February 2014 operating expenses were below the adopted budget by 4 million, or 0.8%, as the continued impacts of multiple snowstorms increased overtime requirements and decreased reimbursable work. These unfavorable labor results were more than offset by favorable non-labor results.
Thank you, Carmen. Now for the...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
each of the members of the board has, I believe, received a communication from TWU Local 106 commenting upon the fact that, as the press has reported, that upon promotion they get less money than they did prior to promotion, and by a substantial amount, on the order of $10,000, and that they have not had a raise for 10 years. I recognize fully that that is not within the province of the distinguished president of New York City Transit and his staff, but I do want to enter on the record that I think it is time to take a good, hard look at equality and fairness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riddler. There's nothing else. We'll go to the MTA Bus Finance Report and its president, Darrell Irick.
Thank you. January 2014 fare box revenues for MTA Bus were $15 million, which is $1 million or 6.5% worse than the adopted budget. January 2014 actual MTA Bus total non-reimbursable accrued expenses before non-cash liabilities were $1 million below the adopted budget. This performance represents the combination of a favorable non-labor expense underrun of $1.4 million and a labor expense overrun of $400,000. For ridership, preliminary January 2014 MTA bus ridership totaled 9.4 million, which is 7.6% or 800,000 less than the adopted budget. Relative to January 2013, average weekday local ridership decreased by 8.6%, average weekday express ridership decreased by 12.8%, and average weekend local ridership decreased by 5.6%. These decreases were primarily the result of the significant winter weather that was experienced in January. This concludes the MTA bus finance and ridership reports.
Darrell,
Mr. Albert.
I understand that the weather impacted the ridership. Were the same number of buses put out during those storms, or less?
No, we significantly curtailed service on several of those days, some by 10, 15, sometimes even 20%, depending on the demand.
So is there a way to show that in the figures as opposed to just fewer riders? It's fewer buses as well.
Oh, absolutely. So we could look at that, sure.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want to paint an inaccurate picture on
Well,
everybody's deserting the buses.
Yeah,
when
no, that's
there
why
weren't
we
that many.
denoted most of it was it was specific to the weather events. I mean, The long-term trend over the last year has showed a plateau in ridership, and in some cases, some areas of increases.
Yeah.
Of course, it's been the same for express buses on MTA bus. It's been a gradual decline. So this was an aberration, and it was all due to the weather, but we can look at that.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I have a quick question for you. Am I correct in understanding that during various incidents that occurred during this period of snowy weather and the like, where trains, for example, were held up, you deployed additional buses so that the people who were stranded could have bus service and transport to their place of work?
Yeah, on request, if we have the ability to, we will help out with shuttles and additional bus services on a sporadic, on an as-need basis.
If I can comment, I mean, I don't think I'm telling anyone anything that all of us are tired of this winter, but it was a really difficult winter on our system. It was one storm after the other. It was relentless in terms of the amount of preparation, the amount of work that we had to go through to keep this system open. We were making decisions day and night about the level of service that we could put out there to accommodate our customers and be able to do it safely and reliably. And I have to tell you, I'm just so proud of the team that we were able to get through this winter, and we're going to do it again tomorrow night. But that we were able to get through it and keep New York City moving.
Did Joe Leader get any sleep during the month at all?
Are we ready for the capital program report? And Fred Smith.
Okay, good morning. Looking to the capital program results for the month of January, a total of 16 new commitments, total $325 million. The two most significant awards to speak of are the award of the first half of this year's 2014 track program, which involves replacement of track components on the main line and yard and switch locations throughout the system. The second is a significant bus purchase for 276 new standard diesel buses. On the completion side, for January, a total of 11 projects completed for $82 million. Most significant within the stations program, the renewal of 5 stations on the Myrtle Avenue line. Central, Knickerbocker, Seneca, Forest Avenue, and Fresh Pond were completed within the 22-month schedule. And the acceptance of the third train, 11 cars, as part of the R188 purchase of the new cars for the Flushing line. That completes my report.
Thank you very kindly. Are there any questions at this point from the committee on the operations report? If there are none, then we're ready for procurements. Lou Montanti will be presenting for Steve Plachaki.
Thank you. The procurement package, which represents New York City Transit procurements, includes 7 actions totaling $78.4 million in expenditures. I would like to highlight our request for 2 of the budget adjustments. The first is the budget adjustment for building and plumbing supplies in the amount of $28.9 million, and the second is the budget adjustment for electrical supplies in the amount of $20.5 million. These contracts provide building materials, plumbing, and electrical supplies to user departments at reduced order-to-delivery lead times directly to work locations via just-in-time tailgate delivery. Savings are realized by eliminating costs associated with storing and handling of the materials as inventory items. Additional benefits of the contracts are 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week delivery, the ability to pick up materials from contractor locations when needed, and also the ability to return unused materials. Both of these contracts were used extensively during storm preparedness and post-storm recovery, as well as to support fast track and other significant initiatives. The original contracts were awarded through a competitive request for proposal process, where the most competitive pricing was obtained through award of 2 contracts, one for building materials and plumbing supplies to Ozone Park Lumber, and the other for electrical supplies to Mid-Island Electric. In addition to providing the most competitive pricing, both of these companies also received the highest technical ranking. Mid-Island is a New York State certified women-owned business. The need for additional funds is primarily driven by a series of new and ongoing infrastructure and capital construction initiatives throughout New York City Transit. I ask for your approval of all actions in the agenda.
Is there a motion and a second for the questions and comments?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know to whom this should be addressed. Let me deal with the first of three. ARCO Environmental Services, page 5.8. The request is for approximately 25%, if not more, of the total amount of the contract. My question is, at the time the contract was let, this was a contract for some $4 million, and you're now seeking $1.7 million, so it's more than a quarter. At the time this contract was let, did we in any way, shape, or form represent how much waste removal would occur so that the people who were doing the work could arguably have been misled and therefore ask for more money? Or was this an instance where there had been a successful bid by ARCO that did not take into account potentialities?
Quite the contrary. There was nothing that was misled to any of the bidders. This contract is structured in a way with estimated quantities that are stated in the bid solicitation, and each of the bidders bid a price, a firm price, for whether it's solid waste, liquid waste, per gallon, or whatever the unit of measure is. What happened, and we got very vibrant competition, and ARCO was substantially lower than the other bidders, so everybody had full knowledge of the estimated quantities at that time. What actually happened through the course of this contract up to this period was that additional quantities of the waste that are being removed were encountered.
And that was not in any way chargeable to them or to us?
Not at all. No, these are pure estimated quantities with unit pricing for each unit, gallon or whatever.
Second, I'd like you to take a look at 5.9, which is Mid-Island, and to the Ozone Park lumber. My question on those two is there's no reference to mentoring, there's no reference to MBWE. Have they been doing anything at all in that regard?
Both contracts were assigned goals, and both companies are achieving those goals. As a matter of fact, as I earlier mentioned, Mid-Island is a certified New York State women-owned business. So all of the procurements that are taking place through Mid-Island would be reflective of procurements to a certified New York State.
And how about Ozone?
Ozone has goals, and they are meeting the goals of that contract.
Third is Kawasaki. And there are some who know I have some problems with the two entities that do all of that work. My question in that regard is the following. Do we, when you let out contracts or you're going through the pre-bidding process, or subsequently, inquire to determine whether or not the successful bidder has agreements with subcontractors, the effect of which is to bar them from competing for the main contract?
I don't think you're referring to this. Are you referring to car solicitations for car contracts? Could you repeat the second part of the question in terms of subcontracts and barring work?
Do you at any stage in the process, whether at the time of bidding or subsequently, check to determine whether or not the successful bidder has entered into subcontract agreements which bar the potential competition of people who otherwise could compete, but who by subcontract are barred from competition in the main area?
Through our negotiations, these are done as the car solicitations are done as requests for proposals. Through our negotiations, we're aware of all of the major proposed subcontractors, and I think if we saw anything like that and we were drilling down into the subsystem costs, we would be aware of what was being offered and whether particular companies that we would expect to come to the table as a subsystem supplier were in some way not responding.
Do you check their subcontracts to determine whether or not that has existed?
I'm not sure
It
of the
has
barring,
come to my attention that that may exist. That's why I raised the question.
Okay, I'm not aware of that, but we are aware, as I said, when we do a solicitation of all of the major subcontractors. As a matter of fact, it's part of the responsibility check, and in our negotiations, we would review not only the cost of the car, but the cost that makes up that car in terms of the major subsystems, and we would be aware of who the major sub-suppliers would be. I personally haven't encountered anything like that.
You may be aware of who they are, but do you know whether they have
I would be aware of
arrangements?
who they're not. In the event that someone that we know is based upon our outreach and our knowledge of the industry, not proposing, or that we're aware the prime proposer is not utilizing somebody who's in a major playing position in that particular subsystem.
I will discuss it with you offline if I may.
Okay, fine.
Mr. Ballard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question on the Kawasaki. How can we be sure that we're getting fair and competitive prices on the replacements that are, quote, obtainable only from Kawasaki?
Okay. We look at our SMS programs in great detail, well in advance of the actual event, and we aggregate all of the requirements that in this case would be Kawasaki related. SMS is the scheduled maintenance. We aggregate those items, we look at them, we do parametric pricing, we do other forms of negotiation directly with Kawasaki. At times we may employ the assistance of our internal audit department to look at how some of the prices are built up. And we have an excellent database maintained of price history, both in terms of New York City Transit and indices that are available in the marketplace, to which we're always benchmarking against. So if you look collectively here, as mentioned in the staff summary, we're below the aggregated PPI for these types of materials. It's the producer price index, but yes, but it's very directly reflective of the history within the marketplace for these particular commodities. It might inflate, it might deflate. In this case, we're below the index that's available for these types of commodities.
Sorry, that's only assuming that the original cost was fair.
Yes, right, and we're comparing it against prior pricing paid, under which we conducted price analyses, audit analysis, parametric pricing, and various other techniques to ensure that we're receiving a fair price. So the benchmark is always against a prior price paid that had already been determined sometime in the past of its fair and reasonableness.
How would you categorize the Kawasaki responses to your trying to negotiate fair prices?
I think they've been adequate. They've been acceptable to us, and we have some excellent techniques, and we typically achieve very, very favorable pricing.
Okay, because I think you have a strong negotiating position given the context of their broader relationship.
Oh, we absolutely do.
Just because they're the sole provider doesn't give them the ability to just dictate prices.
Not at all, and we leverage that to whatever extent we can with Kawasaki and with any of the other major sole source, whether they be car builders or bus builders. We always take advantage of that opportunity.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any further discussion on this procurement package? If there is none, are we ready for a vote? All in favor? Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, will you please record me as abstaining on the Kawasaki contract?
Of course, Mr. Merdler. The record will reflect that. The procurement package moves to the full board. Now for a discussion of the action item before us, Bob Bergen.
Thank you. New York City Transit is seeking a board authorization of a tariff change that will allow us to expand acceptable forms of ID to include a passport and a driver's license to make it easier for senior citizens to use and purchase reduced fare. This is consistent with the practices of other transit agencies around the country. It'll make it more convenient for approximately 300,000 seniors a year who are not enrolled in our reduced fare MetroCard program to benefit from our half fare. Right now there's only one form of ID left, and so this would make it just a lot easier for both our bus operators and station agents to verify age as well as for seniors. So I ask for your approval.
I move we adopt this no-brainer.
Second?
Second.
Is there any question or comment on this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
This moves to the full board for a presentation of service changes to the committee. Robert Lay of MTA Bus, who will be presented by Darrell Irick.
Thank you. I would like to call your attention to the MTA Bus Service Change Staff Summary presented for committee information this month. Our proposal is to revise the weekend travel path of the QM2 Express Bus. The QM2 diverts from its weekday path on Saturdays and Sundays along 20th Avenue at the Whitestone Expressway Service Road in Whitestone, Queens, to serve a densely populated area at Mitchell Gardens. This is an area normally served by the QM20 bus route, which does not operate on weekends. This segment of roadway is very congested on weekends and results in frequent delays on the route. Our recommendation is to streamline the weekend travel path of the QM2 to travel on Parsons Boulevard directly between 14th Avenue and 20th Avenue. The net result of this recommended revision would be a small decrease of less than $2,000 annually. That concludes the service change section of the agenda.
Are there any questions or comments on the service change? Yes, Mr. Albert.
This appears to be a good thing, but can you tell me the walking distance in feet between the stop on the west side of the Whitestone Expressway at 20th Avenue to the proposed Parsons Boulevard and 20th Avenue stop? That seems to be quite a distance.
It's between 800 and 1150
feet.
Yeah, feet.
And how many riders use the Whitestone Expressway stop that you're proposing to move to Parsons Boulevard?
On Saturdays it's less than 25, and on Sundays it's less than 10.
Thank you.
Is there anyone? Yes, Mr. Birdler.
This is proposed to be implemented next month. Has the community board been notified and consulted?
Yes, a letter was sent out to the community board.
When?
The letter went out a little late last week, but we spoke to every elected official involved and the community board, and they were all fine with this.
When did you do that?
Thursday.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Then we're ready for for special presentations. Back to Carmen Bianco.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Section 8 of this month's agenda, we have our regular status report on the MetroCard program. Also included for your information is the 2013 year-end safety report, which provides New York City Transit's 2013 year-end figures for customer injuries, collisions, and employee lost time restricted duty injuries with MTA bus safety goals for 2014.
Any questions or comments on that part of the report? Then I'll ask Carmen to continue with standard follow-up reports.
Thank you. Under standard follow-up items this month, we have the New York City Transit MTA Bus EEO and diversity reports. Both reports provide EEO and HR data as of year-end 2013, provided for your information.
Are there any questions or comments on these reports? If there are none, then I'd like to turn this part of the meeting over to Michael Haradnachenu for an update on MTACC key projects.
Thank you. This year we are about to complete 2 out of the 3 projects for New York City Transit, and this is the Fulton Center and the extension of number 7. I'm going to start with the Fulton Center. With just slightly more than 3 months to go for our projected opening in June, a substantial amount of work remains to be done, and it's challenging work because it's primarily testing and commissioning. We are working with New York City Transit to test and commission the various systems that are necessary for the opening, and at this point we are tentatively scheduling an opening of June 26th. Again, much remains to be done, and we are working together with New York City Transit to accomplish that. As far as the number 7, at this point, we have.
Michael,
Yes.
you're targeting the date of
Yes.
the 26th, right?
Yes,
It's
we're
not set
targeting
in stone.
26 as the date of opening, yes. As far as the number 7 line extension, we are now negotiating with the contractor to basically mitigate some of the delays. We still are confident on the fall of an opening. Again, we're working with New York City Transit because we have to do a lot of the testing and commissioning there. We received at least one inclined elevator from Europe. We expect the second one to arrive, and we have installed a number of the escalators, but we yet to be there to a point that we can start the testing. I would like to point out that in terms of safety for both projects, we have an excellent record on both projects, Fulton Center and number 7, and this is well below the target that has been just revised by the federal government to about 1.7, and we are below that. This is the lost time injury rate, and we are below that on both projects. Regarding 2nd Avenue, we have last Wednesday accomplished something that was very important. We underpinned a 19-story building at 2nd Avenue and 69th Street, actually, and then next to it was another building, a 6-story building that was underpinned as well. And that was a successful operation, and that will allow us to have, in effect, the entry point at that location. Just to bring you up to date, at 96th Street, we have, in fact, completed to cast in place all the mezzanines, and we're now in about 25% of the concrete roof sections are in place, and they're about 10 feet below the grade. As we complete that, that will allow us eventually to start laying all the utilities, so with the idea that towards the end of it, we will be able to restore the street. At 86th Street, the contractor is now moving. He moved already into a 3-shift operation. They're operating 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, with some stuff happening on weekends as needed in preparation for the workers. So that actually is moving along well. We poured all the inverts, 35 or 90% of the walls, and about just a little more than half of the arches have been also cast. So the expectation is that in April we're going to allow the systems people to step in and start doing work at the southern end of the station. Again, the 72nd Street, I mentioned the entry 1 that we have actually been able to underpin the building successfully. And over there, we are actually moved away. We've completed all the structural work, and we're now the systems people and the finishes people are working there. And at 63rd Street station, where about 70% of the work is completed, we in effect continuing the work there, and it's moving along well. One thing to mention, I have mentioned before that low vibration tracks were an issue for us. We needed to receive an approval from the federal government in order to proceed, because we could not identify a Buy American product, and we received that, and we're now moving to accelerate the work. This is on the critical path, and we need to accelerate that. That's about it.
Michael, on the proposed, whenever it opens, Fulton Center, does that include the RE connector to the rest of the complex?
No, it does not. This is, the box for the RE is supposed to be completed by the Port Authority, and we will be doing the finishes as soon as that's done. We have it in our budget, and that will follow once that box is completed.
Thanks.
So in the interest of clarity, even though we open, all the work will not have been completed?
The answer is yes, with one caveat. We did not necessarily, that part of the work was not supposed to be completed for the opening.
Right. Mr. Burnley.
Michael,
Yes.
in prior meetings you've told us about a problem with the escalators at, I believe it is the 7th Avenue line.
That's
Have
right.
they been tested yet? Have they been found sufficient?
No, the escalators, because these are deep, long escalators, the manufacturer could not test them at their facility. So we have agreed that they will install them on site, and we'll do an in situ testing. That's not yet there. They're working on that to install them. And actually they're doing good progress. Hopefully, in effect, we'll be able to start testing it, the first one, in about a month or so. The rest are being installed. There are 5 escalators. They're, I would say, about 180 feet long. So they're being installed as we speak. As far as the elevators, we installed one. The second one is supposed to arrive the first week in April, at which point we'll install that. And once they're installed, we're going to start the testing. And again, it will be not done at the factory, it will be done on site.
And so that the completion will be, in part at least, dependent on whether or not they've done what they have to do on the escalators. Am I right?
That's correct. And we are optimistic that they will be able to address the issues. We have enough time to do so.
Yes, regarding the lost time injury rate,
right?
I noticed. I mean, you should be very proud of the other 2 projects. I noticed the larger the project, the higher the rate. And in 2 cases, one of the reports are in here. Second Avenue Subway and East Side Access, the rate is above the national standard. What are we doing to get that down to the national standard on both those projects?
One of the things, and I'm going to try to get to the Second Avenue. The Second Avenue is now at 1.9, that until about a month ago was below the target. Okay, so this month the ceiling has changed to 1.7. So we need now to address that. I can come back to you with the plan and the program that we have, and to show you what we're doing. It is a very complex. We're addressing it, and we're using, in effect, what we call the DuPont way of approach, in which we're looking at what could be a near miss, and the near miss in terms of safety. And we're looking to report that and then correlate that and create a new way of looking at safety in a way. The idea being that if you do not wear safety glasses or a hat on the job, that is interpreted by us as a near miss. So we are trying to change the whole philosophy and approach by various contractors. Some do a terrific job in doing that, and some less. So we're trying to bring the culture of safety to some of the contractors that are not doing as well, with the same labor force, by the way. The labor force is the same. It's just that the emphasis on some contractors is much more towards safety. Now, I also would like to point out that the Fulton Center is much more of a building contract rather than a heavy civil one. So that's shown in also in the results.
This is also the same for East Side Access, I assume.
That's correct.
Commencement of revenue service for the 2nd Avenue subway. Are you still predicting December 2016?
Yes, indeed.
Is there anything further? If there is nothing else on the capital construction projects report, is there anything on the entire agenda? If there is none, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. An hour, a little.
Oh, that's good.